What's up, Forward fans? Welcome back to our mini recap show we do here every Monday on fantasyandframes.com. I'm your host, Jorge Edwards, and we got a very special guest returning to the family this week, Aaron Pags at Fantasy Triage. How are you doing today?
Man, it feels good to say this. It's a beautiful night to save fantasy football lives.
We have missed that expression like you couldn't believe. And of course, we got Todd Barnes. How you doing there, Todd? Whose microphone is on mute.
Yeah.
Whose screen
and he's frozen.
There we go.
Oh, nice. Double Todd. Oh.
Yeah. Let's do it side by side. Oh, damn it. Okay.
Side by side, Todd.
How you doing, Todd?
Not bad. Yeah, you almost got two of me, so you almost got lucky.
All right. As we do every week, we're going to just talk about some players that caught our eye, discuss them. What do we think about their performance from this past week? And what do we, can project what they're going to be doing later on in the season? Of course, we had our four-eyed recap article drop today. One of the writers here, Jeremy Noble, you can find at the JNobs, TheJNobs. Go follow him. He put out the article today, so we're not going to be talking about obviously those players. So go check that out over at fantasyandframes.com. And let's just get into some performances today. Let's talk about the quarterback position, or just the quarterback position as a whole. Aaron, what do you got for us there?
Yeah, Jorge. I mean, there's a lot of talk about nailing your quarterback this year and how well that's paid off over the first 3 weeks of the season. I mean, pretty much if you picked your quarterback like 2 through 7, you pretty much nailed it. I mean, these are the guys who are at the top of the quarterback rankings outside of like Deshaun Watson, who's kind of dragging a little bit here out of the gate. But, this is more like a general point. We talk all offseason long about how you can wait on quarterback, especially in one quarterback leagues. And that's true. But when you get into season, when we've played 3 weeks, you only have one quarterback that you're playing. And so you need to get points. I mean, like that position counts. So we pretend like it doesn't count all offseason, but then you get into your matchup and your quarterback should be scoring as many points as your opponent's quarterback or more, every single week. And so if you're just saying, oh, I waited on quarterback, great, my running backs are performing well, my wide receivers are performing well. I mean, it could literally come down to your quarterback versus theirs on any given matchup, since we're playing head to head. And you've got guys who are starting every single week, Kirk Cousins, Phillip Rivers, the wait and see quarterbacks Carson Wentz, who just aren't performing in fantasy.
Right.
Meanwhile, the rest of the league has hit on their quarterbacks, and you're staring at the waiver wire every week at Jorge, take a bow, Ryan Tannehill, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Joe Burrow. These guys are consistently every single week in the top 15 scoring quarterbacks every single week. Cousins is never in there. Wentz hasn't been in there. Carr, forget about these guys. Phillip Rivers, it's time to just cut bait. Play that position out now. Now, you waited. Now go get the guys that no one else drafted either. Plug them into your lineups and compete with the Dak Prescotts every week.
Can I ask, are we competing with the Josh Allens?
No one's competing with Josh Allen right now. Josh Allen's going to have a fantasy season to remember, but
yeah, he is unreal. 10 passing touchdowns. He already has 2 rushing touchdowns. Dude has been lights out.
I think something crazy, like if you go back to like week 5 or something last year, he's got like 33 touchdowns and like 3 turnovers or something.
That's with rushing touchdowns.
Yeah,
that's with rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, with rushing touchdowns. There's outrageous numbers.
And then since the season has started, he never has thrown for 300 yards, and he's done it in 3 straight games.
Right, every week.
I think Stephon Diggs has a major factor in that because
sure.
Somebody wrote about that at Fantasy.
Yeah, Stephon Diggs is one of the best route runners, one of the best wide receivers in football. He has made a huge impact on Josh Allen.
Going back to the quarterback topic that you just discussed, Aaron, it's going to be interesting, next offseason when we're doing our, pre-draft rankings and analysis and advice, podcasts and whatnot, and all these articles we're putting out, how much more we're going to be emphasizing, hey, it's great to be a part of the clique and said, I waited on quarterback, but, in my week-to-week matchups, I kind of would rather have a Josh Allen pay up a little bit more for that than just wait on the quarterback, just to say I waited on quarterback and be like everybody else.
I think you can do either. I still think you can do either next year, but I think that the rope that you allow the Wentzes, the Rivers, these guys, the rope that they have has to be really short. You have to be able to just pivot right away. Week 3, find out that the Bengals, that with Joe Mixon is a nothing to them, and so they're going to find out if Burrow can throw the ball. So just go pick up Joe Burrow, put him in your lineup. That's
Drew
what we do with
Sample has more snaps right now than Joe Mixon.
There you go.
We should also pay attention to the signs a lot better, I think, heading into each season. When a running back's deficiency was their offensive line the previous season, and they've done nothing to address that, but going into the following season, that's probably a bad sign for their fantasy outlook and potential.
Yeah.
That's why I own 0 Mixon.
That's what we do. That's what I was talking about with Jorge before you joined us, Todd. I'm so glad I went that way.
Yeah,
Hashtag
0 Mixon, and I'm so glad.
Hashtag 0 Mixon strategy. Speaking of running backs, let's get into some running backs. Let's get into a backfield that utterly befuddles me, and I have some thoughts as far as where to go with this, and that's the Atlanta backfield. Todd Gurley had 15 total touches, and he got 82 rushing yards and 14.7 fantasy points in FanDuel scoring. Conversely, Brian Hill, the backup, got 10 touches for 80 yards and 14.5 fantasy points in FanDuel scoring. Todd, what do we make of this?
Man, first off, Todd Gurley has not looked fantastic on the season, and second off, they're not really utilizing the running backs with receptions like you would hope they would. They're throwing so much, but when they do throw, they have stud wide receivers that they're throwing to. Combined last week, they had 5 targets and 2 catches for 24 yards. So out of the reception game, they're not really helping you at all. Gurley looked pretty good, 14 carries for 80 yards, and Brian Hill had that really nice touchdown run. But right now, I don't think either running back is Gurley's obviously a flex. Hill's obviously a bench play. But I don't think either one is really a running back you're really looking to start at the moment.
I had Gurley as my flex this week in one of my leagues. Now I was happy that he got the points that he did. But somebody that I left on my bench, who's another running back we'll talk about, is Daryl Henderson. Everyone was concerned, like, even though Cam Akers is out, you're still Henderson is still competing for targets with what's his name? Why am I blanking on his name? Los Angeles Rams running back.
Malcolm Brown.
Thank
Malcolm
you.
Brown.
Malcolm Brown's coming back from having thumb surgery. And here's the thing: we all should have known when you hear about a player coming back from thumb surgery that they're probably not going to be carrying the ball that much that coming week. Thinking that these people are still human, go figure. But Daryl Henderson, 21 touches, 120 total yards, 18.5 fantasy points. He's playing so well. And Cam Akers doesn't sound like he's going to be coming back anytime soon. And Henderson is outproducing Brown so much. And it's just really amazing to see that the guy that everyone was preseason darling last year when he was drafted, then all of a sudden they draft Cam Akers and he's like an afterthought. Now you're in the season and he's again in the forefront. Is pretty amazing. I personally feel a lot more comfortable flexing Daryl Henderson and Todd Gurley at this point. Is that crazy to sound?
Wow, that is wow. I'm surprised you went there. I don't, unsettled backfield, split carries, running backs by committee, whatever you want to call them. These are like fantasy avoids, right? Like we try to avoid them. They can't be your running back 1s or running back 2s. We preach this forever. Like you can't rely on these guys to be every single week in your lineup. You got to kind of try to play the matchups. But also when you get into it and you're trying to play the matchups, you need to look at catches, passes out of the backfield. Like that's receptions. And that's what Todd was talking about. The Falcons just aren't targeting the running backs. And so I think I'm with you, Jorge. I think, the Rams throw the ball a lot and they also find the running backs pretty often. And so I think I'm leaning that way. Todd shaking his head no. He still wants Gurley.
No, what I'm going to say is actually the Rams literally do not target running backs.
Oh.
Last season, they were dead last, and running back receptions, they're among the league worst this season.
Are they?
Yes. That's one of their things is their running backs, they may get carries, they may get goal line touches and stuff. Their running backs don't get receptions like that.
They had 6 targets on the year total.
Yeah, exactly.
Really
2017, Gurley had 50-plus catches. or no, 2018 Gurley had 50 plus catches.
He did.
2019, that team saw its team NFL low 37 receptions.
Unreal.
Yeah.
Unreal.
So
Yeah.
that team does not target running backs. So overall, if you're playing in PPR, I just don't mess with that backfield at all because you're just basically relying on them scoring a touchdown.
It is crazy. He's only playing in 49% of snaps, yet he had 20 attempts for, like I said, 120 total yards, averaging 5.7 yards per carry. I mean, he's playing it like out of his mind. Like I don't even think if Cam Akers comes back, they necessarily, pull him out of the lineup depending on how well he's producing. Sometimes you just get Wally pipped and that's your thing. Rashad Penny was supposed to be the draft darling, who was the first round pick for the Seahawks a few years ago, but Chris Carson wouldn't go away, and Chris Carson just kept on producing, and they had no incentive to remove Chris Carson from the backfield. And I think you're seeing this with Daryl Henderson and Cam Akers this year.
I mean, in a standard league, I don't think Henderson's a bad play at all. But if we're talking PPR or half PPR, the Rams backfield is just one I avoid just solely based on that they just do not target their running backs.
Speaking of running backs being targeted, can we now concede? I guess we shouldn't really say like we can concede, but Austin Eckler, like we really shouldn't be concerned after his week 1 performance, right? I mean, 143 total yards on 23 touches, 25.8 fantasy points. Like with the rookie at the helm, we're fairly confident in Austin Eckler going forward. Am I correct here?
He's a wide receiver that plays running back, so yes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's the cheat code, right? He's a PPR cheat code. He's the slot receiver who plays running back. Counts in your running back slot. He's like lining up Mike Gesicki in your tight end slot. You know what I mean? The guy plays wide receiver, but he's got the tight end tag. Eckler is a wide receiver who just happens to qualify at running back.
Right. Good call. Speaking of the running backs for the Chargers, Joshua Kelly, he had those 23 attempts in week 2. He barely got close to double digits. I think he had like 5 attempts this week. Just a matter of game script, or was week 2 the anomaly, and what we're seeing with him going forward is going to be the trend? Aaron, what are your thoughts there?
It's weird, right? Quarterback change comes. Herbert comes in. Kelly now Herbert's throwing the ball to Eckler a little more. I don't know what to make of the backfield. Like I said, I know that Eckler is the PPR monster, and I don't expect Kelly to cut into any of his receptions, right? I mean, if he gets 1 or 2 or whatever, but he's not going to cut into that portion of the playbook. So, right. Kind of what Todd was talking about, there's a limited upside there when he's not going to be involved in the passing game, and so you become more dependent on the touchdown. And, I don't know what that offense is going to be now under Herbert. I'd like to take a wait and see. He's a decent bench stash. If you drafted him, I definitely think hold on to him. You can't throw him away here. He's got enough talent and enough opportunity, likely going forward, that, wait and see. But I just don't think you can trust him in your lineup, not even as a flex. He's like an RB3 or something.
Yeah. Todd, you have any running backs to talk about?
No, actually, I was going to talk about Joshua Kelly right now. I was going to say that, he's only had 4 targets on the year.
There you go.
That was the big thing, and Eckler had 11 this week. That was what we were kind of questioning on whether or not the San Diego, or I guess Los Angeles backfield would be complimenting this season, and early on in the season, they were not targeting running backs at all. And then week 3, all of a sudden, they hit up Eckler. So, I mean, I think Joshua Kelly's still a hold. I think he could still be an RB3, RB4. I mean, he averaged 5.4 yards per carry still, even on this week. He had 8 carries. He also had a fumble that he did not lose, but still something to think about. So, I don't know if that's why he was used less, but he lost a fumble this week, so that's kind of something I would watch out for.
You lose the ball.
Yeah.
That's the rumor. Jeff Wilson, who didn't really see this coming? I think we were talking about this during our pregame show.
15 touches.
15 touches, 69 total yards, 20.4 fantasy points. It just figures that everybody blows their fab on Jerick McKinnon after week 2. And it's, go figure it's Shanahan. No, we're going to give it to Jeff Wilson for a majority of the touches there in the fantasy production. I'm not really still comfortable riding this backfield unless the running back's name is Raheem Mostert. So going forward, I think this week people are going to overpay for Jeff Wilson again, or just overpay in general, and overpay on the San Francisco running back again. It's really unpredictable until Mostert gets back. I wouldn't spend a lot of money on Jeff Wilson this week going forward.
He's a 2 to 3 start.
Right.
Like start. Like you can only start him 2 to 3 weeks max.
Right.
Better get
On
those
the whole
weeks right.
season.
You better get those weeks
And you better
right.
get them right. So you better be a good gambler.
Aaron, you have any thoughts on Mike Davis in Carolina?
Oh man, gosh. Another team where like you just don't know, right? Like their entire offense is built around Christian McCaffrey. And now with McCaffrey on the sideline, who the heck knows what their offense is going to be like? You literally just took out the whole, took out 90 whatever percent of their offensive game plan was get the ball to CMC. And so, there are plenty of touches to go around. There's plenty of, plays that need to be drawn up to someone. Not trustworthy enough for me.
All right, let's go to wide receivers really quickly. Michael Pittman, we were talking about this before the show, had this really freakish accident happen to his leg. Aaron, can you describe again how you described it to us a little bit earlier?
So if you get an injury, typically it's in a long bone, and typically these injuries it could be a fracture, it could be like a stress thing. It could just be some kind of trauma to the area. And so we worry about this all the time when you put a splinter cast on an injury, that there won't be room for the natural swelling and regression of the swelling. And then what ends up happening is if, I don't know that this is what happened in his case, but what can end up happening is that swelling can get into space in your body where it's not supposed to be. And it can get basically trapped there. They call it compartment syndrome. It's typical, like, in a kid who breaks his arm and they put the cast on too tight or something like that. And it can be like, it can be pretty serious. It can be pretty serious. So I know Todd got a little more insight on to what, kind of more what happened, but I wouldn't take that lightly. I think, I don't know if Pittman was maybe on the borderline of your wide receiver 3 going to play, something like that, flex option borderline. But I don't think, for this season, I think we're talking, down the line,
right,
type of stuff.
I mean, Pascal's been running the slot routes anyway, and we have seen what Phillip Rivers and his slot receiver has produced over his seasons.
Right.
So, if anything, I think this is just, if you have Pascal on your waivers, add him this week, without a doubt.
Speaking of slot wide receivers, there was one heralded coming out of college, Justin Jefferson for the Vikings, and did he produce this week? 9 targets, 175 yards, 27 fantasy points. Now, this is somebody who, if you're deficient at wide receiver, if you're the Michael Thomas manager, the Devontae Adams manager, or basically if you're the Odell Beckham manager, at this point,
that's funny.
Justin Jefferson is somebody who I'm definitely taking a look at and investing some fab in, just because he's just so good. He's just so good at coming out of college. Obviously, Cousins trust him given the high target volume, and he's producing with what targets he's being given. So, given the fact that this Vikings team has not looked really good this entire season, and chances are they're going to be playing a lot of catch up from behind games, the target volume should be there for him going forward. Todd, do you have any thoughts on Justin Jefferson, or can we just leave it at that and go to the next wide receiver?
They finally moved him out of the slot, and that was
Really?
Minnesota. Actually, for the last 2 seasons, has very rarely used a slot wide receiver and exploited other teams through the slot. I actually wrote an article and said how I think Minnesota was one of 5 teams with under 1,000 slot yards last season. Weeks 1 and 2, Justin Jefferson was basically exclusively used out of the slot. In college, he was used as a deep receiver. he was used out of the slot a lot with Joe Burrow, but his sophomore year mainly uses a deep wide receiver. But yeah, so Justin Jefferson is a guy that I think you can definitely add. I mean, Minnesota's defense is terrible. They're going to be playing from behind a lot. He could be a wide receiver 3-4 heading through the rest of the season.
That's really impressive, him transitioning from the slot position to out wide and still having that production. All right, let's get to another wide receiver in the NFC North. Alan Lazard, 8 targets, 146 yards, 23 fantasy points. Last night on Sunday Night Football. So let's not be fooled by this performance. That was Devontae Adams' performance. If Devontae Adams was playing in that spot at the left wide receiver position as the wide receiver 1. Who was the wide receiver 2 for that game last night? Because that's what Lazard's role will be going forward once Adams comes back. So I don't think you should be investing too much in Alan Lazard despite that performance. Now, if Devontae Adams is gone for an extended period of time, that's a different story. Because his average depth of target is pretty insane. And Aaron Rodgers, for some reason, he trusts him because he's making plays. Not for some reason, because he is making plays downfield. When Adams comes back, I don't see him being somebody that you could just keep in your lineup, even as a flex. Are you on the same page there, Aaron?
Yeah, I mean, you know, everyone knows by now that there's like two positions I hate, and it's Patriot running backs and number 2 wide receivers in Green Bay. I mean, Marquez Valdez-Scantling is the guy that Jorge was talking about, who was lined up as the number 2 guy. He had 1 catch for 5 yards, played 92% of the snaps with Adams out. So he's not going to get 92% of the snaps when Adams is in, obviously. And so even with his opportunity there, he's, again, Aaron Rodgers' number 2 wide receiver is Aaron Jones. He's their second best wide receiver. And, that's outside of this offense, like if Adams doesn't play and you want to plug Lazard in, I think I'm okay with that. But that's strictly if Adams doesn't play. If Adams plays, Adams and Jones are the 2 top targets. There's just no reason to play any of these other guys. And there's better dice rolls than the other guy in the Packers wide receiving core. If
Adams and Jones plays, the guy that's stretching the field is MVS. Through 2 weeks, he was number 12 in air yards for wide receivers. So if both those guys are on the field, the guy that's stretching the field for them is MVS and not Alan Lazard.
Good to know. The next wide receiver that we'll get to is one that is near and dear to my heart. I wrote about him all season. I was hyping his praises, and as somebody who was trailing in their fantasy matchup last night, I was very happy to see him go off on 9 targets and 138 yards and 22.8 fantasy points. Talking about Michael Gallup, I was so excited about his potential heading into the season. I thought Cooper and QD would draw attention away from Gallup, given all the hype that the coaching staff was giving Gallup in training camp. And no, it's been the other way around. It's been those outside receivers freeing up CeeDee Lamb over the middle. Look at targets. Cedric Wilson came out of nowhere last night against the Seahawks to be productive. No, you're not spending fab on
Again, no fab. Yes, I'm so glad you mentioned his name. No fab on him. 0, 0, 0. Not worth the bid.
No, it's really not worth it. I mean, you look at the target distribution between Gallup and Cooper. Again, very similar. 12 targets to Gallup's 9 targets. But what makes Michael Gallup so explosive and such a good fantasy option is his average depth of target. He had more catches downfield than Amari Cooper did and CeeDee Lamb did, and that's what you're paying for when you're trying to get Michael Gallup. Or at least, I shouldn't say that's what you're paying for, but that's what you're expecting to get out of Michael Gallup. It's those deep plays, and he had that against Jalen Ramsey in week 1, and he missed it because of that bogus pass interference call. He didn't really have that opportunity in week 2. And yesterday, finally, Dak was like, "Hey, I have rapport with this wide receiver who's my deep threat. Let me throw it to this guy." And when he gets targeted downfield, he produces. And as far as his production going forward, here's the thing that really gets me. I don't know. I really think it depends. I mean, if they're in a lot of close games, first of all, I think they're kind of wishing they had Jason Garrett back. And let me explain what I mean. In the past 3 weeks, when they faced their opponents, they're always playing catch-up. Like, they always have to, rally back to make it a close game at the end. And that's not really going to be conducive to a team that can really, put their foot on their throats and put them away at the end of the game.
Well, that's
their
bad news.
Secondary has been terrible.
I was going to say, and that's bad news for Zeke, right? That's not bad news for their wide receiving core. That's great news for the wide receiving
Great
core.
news.
Yeah.
Because Amari Cooper has 14, 9, and 12 targets on the year. Like, he is getting targeted insane amounts.
But here's the thing: even though Cooper's getting targeted, how can you parse out if it's going to be Lamb or Gallup? That's my concern. I hope yesterday was an indication of like when times are tough, let me go to the receiver that I have trust in, which is Gallup. And given how this defense is playing, that may occur more often than not. But CeeDee Lamb has been like a thorn in Gallup's side so far in terms of his fantasy production so far this year. So I don't know. I hope that Dak is turning the corner and realizing that Michael Gallup should be targeted more, and especially if they are down in matchups. So I guess
hard to bench him though, Jorge. Hard to bench him though. No,
hard to bench him.
It is. It is very hard to. Like I'm not saying you should bench Gallup for CeeDee. But man, it is a head scratcher when you're thinking about like why isn't
Cleveland and the Giants coming up in the next 2 weeks for him too, and Cleveland is super banged up and the Giants just suck.
Ken Sonnenberg, if you're listening, I hope you Rod Barnes that said that, not me. Any other wide receiver?
Yes, Jorge. One more from wide receiver U, man. Finally had his moment to step into the lineup and get some snaps and get some share of the offense under rookie quarterback Joe Burrow. T. Higgins, my man, 5 catches. He only had 40 yards, two touchdowns, so made every bit worth it. He did have 9 targets. I actually like went back and watched all 5 of his receptions and kind of got a feel for how they drew up the plays and whatnot. He's 6'4", he's a big guy, 216, 220, whatever you want to say. Like he's one of these guys who can play that kind of tight end role, that kind of like in between the numbers kind of guy, which is a quarterback's best friend, right? Somebody who he could throw check down, yeah, get in between the numbers.
Joe Burrow's best friend.
Yeah, Joe Burrow's best friend. And so like I watched it all. Both of the touchdowns that they ran, down on the goal line, they drew up the plays. They were plays drawn up for T. Higgins. You watch them. They ran that little under screen. He snuck behind the defense both times. Like these were set plays between Burrow and Higgins, and I think that there's like a connection that's going to build there. This guy is he's going to go under the radar for ads this week behind Jefferson and Lazard for sure in the wide receivers. And so I think if you can get your hands on T. Higgins, I don't know that you can start him with confidence in week 4, but I think he's a guy who, when you get to the buys, is going to really help out some teams here. So a nice little stash. You get him cheap because who knows, he might end up playing more than 60% of the snaps than he did this week. And all of a sudden now he's the top bid next week. So yeah,
love it.
Jump on him.
Jorge, can I add a guy that I'm off of for a wide receiver?
Yeah, go for it.
So I'm actually really with Aaron on that ad, but a guy that I'm not on this week is someone that everyone was really liking is N'Keal Harry. They draw up plays for him left and right, and he continuously does nothing with them. He had 12 targets in week 2, 10 targets in week 1 and 3 combined. He's just someone that if you thought was a deep ad in a league, just completely avoiding. He does nothing with it. I think Demir Bird has stepped up in his place and even overstepped him as the wide receiver 2 right there.
A good call. All right, and with that wraps up our mini recap show. Obviously, head over to fantasyandframes.com and check out our 4-eyed recap article that, again, Jeremy Noble put out this morning. And stay tuned tomorrow for our 4-eyed waiver claim articles, where we're going to be having articles dropping for offense and articles dropping for defense, specifically speaking IDP. Then come back and join the cast and crew of Fantasy and Frames as we talk about our starts and sits heading into week 4. It's crazy. We're already getting to week 4. The season is flying by too fast. So for Aaron, for Todd, and Jorge, we'll catch you next time.